are going back to 2008 for a second over here with The Incredible Hulk, which is a movie that I said I would talk about at the end of the previous video, closer to the new Captain America, but then the more I thought about it, the more I realized I have to address this movie because there's no way I can do phase 1 and 2 out of order. I have to do this right, and so I figured I'll just do this right now and then move on with the rest of the movies. People may not know this, but I am a massive fan of the Hulk. I love the character. I've read so many comics of this character. I love some of those storylines, but I've also really loved what they do when it comes to the turmoil between, Bruce Banner being just a mild-mannered scientist and then of course being pushed to the point that he becomes the Hulk and then tearing everything apart in his wake. And some of the storylines that were birthed from that were really interesting. There was also a lot of stuff when it came to TV and of course the Ang Lee movie in 2003. And so going into The Incredible Hulk is one of those things where of course I was pumped out of my mind for it. I really loved the character already. When I finally went to go see the movie, I remember having a very good time with it, although it's not a perfect movie by any means. And as time has gone by with other movies that have come out in the MCU, it's also not necessarily my favorite MCU movie. In fact, it's pretty low when it comes to a lot of the rankings. However, I don't necessarily think The Incredible Hulk is a bad movie by any means. I think it does some really good stuff, and I think there are some aspects of it that are actually among some of the nicer things of the MCU for me. Let's start with the Hulk himself. I think Hulk in this movie is the most aggressive and visceral Hulk that has been put to screen. I love what Mark Ruffalo did with the Hulk. I love the portrayal of that character, and a lot of the progression of that character has been super nice. But at the same time, the version of Hulk which is shown over here, this force to be reckoned with, this absolute carnage machine that he can become, that is portrayed really well over here, especially in some of the early moments of the movie where he is shown to be just this unstoppable force. I really love that stuff, and I think the movie captured that really well. I also think the look of this particular Hulk complements that. He's got this very pulsing look to him at times, but also he looks like he's done like 500 reps at the gym before the camera rolled on him. He looks almost feral. It's like if you saw a wolf coming at you, just like it feels like that sometimes. Like there is this visceralness to him that is very, very well captured, and that's actually one of the things I liked about it. And I think Edward Norton as Bruce Banner is also very good. I think one thing that the movie doesn't do as well is sort of capture more of the tragedy of the character, because there is something sad about Bruce Banner's storyline, and that so much has happened along the way and things that have been done to him in order to make him the Hulk and all the things that he's been through. And sometimes I feel like the movie could have done a little bit more with that, but I still really liked Edward Norton in the role. And while it was only a one-off and then he was replaced with Mark Ruffalo, I think he did a decent job. Tim Roth I really liked in this movie as Emil Blonsky, this special forces military guy who has a bunch of great commendations to his name, and he's taking on Hulk, and he's like, wait, this thing is a lot more than I bargained for. We need to dial it up, and when it comes to taking this guy on. And he sort of becomes this testing lab rat for General Ross, played by William Hurt in this movie. And eventually when he becomes the Abomination, you get to see, again, a more visceral version of this kind of a giant compared to Hulk. He makes the Hulk look tame in a couple of ways, especially when it comes to the overall design of him. It's also a very visceral movie when it comes to the action sequences. This is a very raw movie. When you look at some of the movies now in the MCU, sometimes it can feel a little cleaner. This does not feel clean. Here you see people get battered and bruised and bloody and broken bones all over the place, like mangled up stuff a lot of the times. And it really feels like there are these sometimes, very, what's the word for it? It's like these very gnarly is the word I was looking for, stakes to certain things, like especially when you're even getting towards the final third of the movie, like big CGI battle, but it feels like this very dirty, grimy CGI battle where, they're literally trying to tear each other apart, the Hulk and Abomination. And that action is really well done. There's this outstanding chase scene that happens early on in the movie where Bruce is discovered and he's running across the streets of Rio and then the rooftops. Great score by Craig Armstrong as well, which, by the way, can I just say, this is one of my favorite MCU scores, Craig Armstrong's score. I actually think that as far as the movie goes, it may not be my favorite in the MCU, but I did really like that aspect of it. The themes and the musical motifs that are used over here were really, really good. I also liked the Hulk's theme in general, that, very ominous violin which was there to it, and with the organ and stuff. So that entire sequence is great. There's this great moment at Culver University where the military shows up with these sonic, trucks, and eventually the Hulk has to fight through all of that and then take them on, and eventually it leads to him just about saving Betty from an explosion as well. The big fight in Harlem that happens like right in front of the Apollo for a bit was really cool. It's very funny watching that battle because sometimes it gets referenced every now and then, but I'm surprised it wasn't referenced in something else later on. Like, I remember watching Luke Cage and I was like, at some point, can somebody just say, hey, remember that time those two big guys just, trashed 125th? That shit was crazy, right? Like that, I don't know. There's a lot of positives like I'm throwing around right now, but I will say that when it comes to the dramatic aspects of it and some of the storytelling, it can falter a bit. There's stuff going on with Bruce trying to find a cure and these conversations he's having with a Mr. Blue, who we don't really meet until much later in the movie. And some of that is interesting, but for a long time of the movie, we also go into him trying to reconcile with Betty, Liv Tyler, and the relationship between them that has frayed and fallen apart, but they're trying to piece it back together in some way, though you do know there's a history between them. And sometimes when it comes to those moments, it can feel a little slow, and it's not quite as interesting as some of the other storylines going on. Like, I was more invested in a few other aspects than that, but since the movie takes so long going on with this, relationship that is there, it can feel like it drags the movie a bit, which is not that long anyway, but then the first act and third act are really, really, intense and fun. The second act, though, it does kind of meander and go all over the place, and there's some stuff that's just not very interesting. But at the same time, it makes up for some of that with some of those more interesting action sequences. When you do eventually meet Mr. Blue, played by Tim Blake Nelson, you do have this shot at, hey, he might have found a cure, but it doesn't really work out, and he eventually ends up enhancing Blonsky's abilities from the serums that he's been getting from Ross and creating the Abomination. And he gets infected with some of it, and for the longest time, you had no idea what was going to happen with that. And now, I think most people know this, he's apparently in the new Captain America movie. So he's going to be a villain over there. I guess he's going to be the Thinker. So that should be interesting if they are doing that. I mean, I'm excited to see how they're going to pull off that character. I mean, Emil Blonsky is currently in group therapy or like wellness, I guess, because of the She-Hulk stuff that was going on. I guess he's still there because that's how the series ended. So good for him, I guess. Or he's doing underground fights every now and then where with Wong, because you saw that in Shang-Chi. So yeah, it's a bunch of stuff basically going on with him. He's trying to figure himself out. Give him some time, guys. And I'm sure every reviewer worth anything has said this before, but this moment rules. Hulk! Smash! I am the last person reviewing this or talking about this movie that has talked about that scene. Everybody with a pulse has talked about how cool that scene is. And it is, in fact, really, really cool. This also, of course, ends with the big stinger of Tony Stark appearing that, hey, we're putting together a team. Obviously, when Iron Man 2 comes around, you find out it's more of a consultant position at first. But again, well, getting ahead of myself there. But I feel like Iron Man 2 is the one that really is the big movie where you're like, oh, this is happening. But this was a really cool ending, and I remember we saw that going, oh wow, this is, I guess we're about to get a big team up movie, Iron Man and Hulk. That'll be cool, right? I mean, can you imagine if there's more heroes? The mind wanders, am I right? So yeah, The Incredible Hulk is a fine movie. Like I said, there's a lot to enjoy in it, and there are things that I like about it, but overall, the character drama stuff, some of those emotional beats, some of the side plots that are going on aren't very interesting, and overall, by the end of it, I was fine with it. Again, I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's the worst MCU movie. It's not particularly high though on my ranking list. There are movies that have come out since that have been considerably better. But I will pop it in every now and then just because it's a fun enough watch. Also, visually it's pretty good. There's some really great stuff going on in terms of the, what you're seeing on screen, and I did appreciate a lot of that. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.